For a decade, Libya was supposed to be Vladimir Putin's answer to losing the Middle East. When the Wagner Group fought alongside Khalifa Haftar, when Russian mercenaries moved into Benghazi, when Syria fell, and Moscow began relocating soldiers and equipment into North Africa within weeks. Every move was designed to build a foothold on the Mediterranean, extend Russian influence across the Sahel, and hold leverage over European migration flows. 10 years of patient investment. 10 years of cultivating warlords and undermining governments. And then, in a single agreement signed in October 2025, Libya's legitimate government chose the other side. Now Ukrainian drones launch from Libyan soil, and Putin's African strategy is unraveling faster than anyone inside the Kremlin is willing to admit. To understand what Russia has lost in Libya, you have to start with what Russia thought it was building. Libya has been fractured for years, split between two rival governments locked in a cold civil war. On one side is the government of national unity, based in Tripoli, internationally recognized as Libya's legitimate authority. On the other side is the government of national stability, endorsed by Khalifa Haftar and his paramilitary organization, the Libyan National Army. Despite its name, the Libyan National Army is not a state institution. It is a coalition of militias and military units fighting to seize power from Tripoli. Haftar laid siege to Tripoli in 2019 and 2020. He failed. He has spent the years since consolidating control over eastern Libya and building relationships with foreign powers willing to invest in his ambitions. Chief among those powers was Russia. The Wagner Group fought alongside Haftar. Russian military personnel operated in territory he controls. After Bashar al-Assad's regime fell in Syria, Russia began shifting assets from Syrian bases into Libya as early as January 2025. For Moscow, Haftar represented the same bet Russia has made repeatedly across Africa. Find a warlord, provide mercenaries and weapons, wait for him to seize power, and collect the oil, gas, and basing rights afterward. The playbook worked in Syria for years. It showed early promise in Mali and the Central African Republic. In Libya, it was supposed to give Russia a Mediterranean coastline it did not have to share with NATO. That was the plan. And in October 2025, the government of national unity walked into that plan and set it on fire. The agreement between Kyiv and Tripoli was signed quietly. According to reporting from Radio France Internationale, Ukrainian military personnel began arriving in Libya by November 2025. Barely a month after the signing. Over 200 Ukrainian experts and officers deployed across 3 sites. At the Air Force Academy in Misrata, Ukraine joined a facility already hosting Italian and Turkish forces, a British intelligence center, and elements of U.S. Africa Command. At a base in Zawiya, 50 kilometers north of Tripoli, Ukrainian personnel operated facilities capable of launching aerial and naval drones. At a third coastal site still under construction, Ukrainian engineers installed antenna systems and runways. According to the Kyiv Independent, the agreement included Libyan oil sector investment from Ukraine, drone training for Libyan troops, and a promise of future arms sales once Ukraine's war with Russia ends. Ukrainian and Libyan personnel now liaise directly at the headquarters of Libya's 111th Brigade. Quick note, you're watching Iron Brief. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. The political meaning of this arrangement cannot be overstated. Libya's internationally recognized government did not drift into Ukraine's orbit by accident. It made a choice. And that choice was a repudiation of a decade of Russian influence operations. Putin spent years cultivating Haftar. He spent years investing in the warlord's forces through Wagner. He spent years positioning Russia as the external power most willing to back the Libyan National Army's ambitions. In return, on Libya's legitimate authorities invited Russia's enemy onto Libyan soil, and signed away access to infrastructure that can now be used to hunt Russian shadow fleet tankers across the Mediterranean. It is, in strategic terms, the single clearest rejection of Russian influence any African government has delivered in years. The results arrived quickly. On December 19, 2025, Ukraine's security service struck the Qendil, a Russian shadow fleet tanker sailing under an Omani flag in international waters between Malta and Greece. Months later, the Arctic Metagaz, loaded with 60,000 tons of Russian liquid natural gas, was hit en route to Port Said. According to Euronews, the crew was evacuated by Maltese authorities. A Libyan towing operation failed. The Arctic Metagaz continues to drift. 9 European Union states, led by Italy, condemned the strike on environmental grounds. The World Wildlife Fund warned of ecological disaster. But the operational pattern is clear. The same Libya that Russia spent a decade trying to dominate is now the platform from which Ukraine is dismantling Russia's most valuable revenue stream. The Kremlin's response revealed how badly this has landed. Putin personally addressed the Arctic Metagaz strike on Russian state television, calling it a terrorist attack. Russia's transport ministry threatened the European Union. On April 8th, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova publicly named the Ukrainian unit operating in Libya as Group 13 in remarks carried by TASS. Zakharova condemned the international community for allowing Ukrainian operations against Russian vessels to continue. Why, the rhetoric is familiar, the substance is not. Russia has publicly acknowledged that it now cannot protect its most important commercial asset across an entire sea, and that the adversary doing the damage is operating from a country Russia was supposed to control. But Libya's story is not exceptional. It is the rule of what happens when an authoritarian strategy built on warlords and mercenaries collides with a legitimate government willing to choose. The pattern is repeating across Russia's former sphere of influence: Venezuela, Iran, Syria. Each loss has compounded the others. Each regime that has fallen or shifted has reduced Russia's global reach. France's Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs, Jean-Noël Barrot, stated plainly when the European Union announced new sanctions in March that Russia's invasion of Ukraine must end, calling it a strategic, political, and economic failure. In Africa, the European Union now invests 200 times more than Russia. Libya is the latest marker in a map that has been shrinking for years. The strategic implications reach beyond the shadow fleet. Writing for the Times of Israel, Amin Ayoub of the Middle East Forum argued that Ukraine's presence in Libya is a calculated transformation, a forward operating base for what he described as an expanding conflict poised to be fought on Arab territory. Ayoub warned that Libya's sovereignty is being treated as negotiable collateral, and that all foreign military influences in the country require a United Nations mandate that is not coming. He is correct on both counts. Libya has become a contested zone where Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, Italy, the United Kingdom, and the United States all maintain some form of presence. The country's oil and gas infrastructure, already fragile, now sits in the middle of a proxy contest that no international framework is prepared to regulate. The Guardian has reported that Haftar continues to use Libya's coast to send migrants into Europe, possibly at Putin's direction, and that Libyan territory serves as a waypoint for Russian weapons flowing into Sudan, where civil war has created exactly the kind of chaos the Kremlin exploits. The question the Kremlin cannot answer is the only question that matters. What does Russia's Africa strategy look like when the legitimate government of a country, Russia, spent a decade trying to capture, invites Russia's enemy onto its soil? There is no answer. Putin built his influence through warlords who cannot hold territory they do not already control. through mercenaries who cannot replace legitimate state institutions, and through investments that depended on regimes that have not survived. Libya was supposed to be the compensation for losing Syria. Instead, it has become the stage where Russia's weakness in Africa is being demonstrated publicly, in real time, by a country that was supposed to have no projection capability at all. And every tanker that goes down in the Mediterranean is another confirmation that the decade Putin spent building this strategy has already been wasted. If you want to see how Ukraine's Libya operation works tactically, check out our breakdown of the Zawiya base and the naval drone strikes. And if you want to understand how Russia's global influence is collapsing across every continent, our deep dive into the Kremlin's international retreat will show you the full pattern. Subscribe to Iron Brief so you never miss what comes next.